The bank heist so perfect it fooled the FBI for 20 years. The Chicago skyline glittered like a million stars that morning. Down below, an armored truck rolled out of the Federal Reserve's underground vault, carrying $32 million in freshly printed bills. It was supposed to be one of the most secure transports in the country. 2 guards, 1 driver, a bulletproof shell, and a police escort trailing a few cars behind. But 20 minutes later, that same truck was found 5 miles away, empty, both steel doors locked from the inside, no sign of a struggle, and every man assigned to it missing. When detectives arrived, they expected a shootout, a hijack, something chaotic. Instead, the scene was eerily calm. The driver's seat was pushed back, keys still in the ignition. The dashboard camera showed the truck leaving the vault, turning onto East Harrison Street, and then vanishing from view. But when the FBI pulled the backup footage from the street cameras, they froze. 2 identical trucks appeared on screen, both leaving the vault at the same time. Same license plate, same driver, same everything. And one of them simply faded out as it reached the bridge. No one could explain it. The footage wasn't edited. The timestamps matched perfectly, and experts swore it was real. For 20 years, the case sat unsolved, until a young intern in 2018 decided to redigitize the old tapes and noticed something everyone else had missed. Behind the reflection of the truck's window, there was a faint shadow, a person who shouldn't have been there. The shadow was standing outside the truck, even though the glass showed the same man driving. That was when the screen glitched and the image of the truck started to move on its own. The FBI agent in charge, Mark Daly, stared at the footage for hours. "How can something leave twice?" he whispered. Then, for a brief second, a new frame flashed, showing the inside of a vault that had never been recorded. A man's face appeared in the darkness, mouth moving as if whispering something to the screen. And then static. The file corrupted itself before they could replay it. Now, let's go back to where it all began. September 10th, 1998. It was just after sunrise when John Keller, the driver, fastened his seatbelt and checked a mirror. Behind him sat Sam Peterson and Rick Hale, 2 security guards who'd been working these routes for years. They joked about the Cubs' latest loss as the heavy truck rumbled through the morning fog. Everything about the day felt normal. Too normal. At the Federal Reserve loading dock, the supervisor signed off on the transfer order. $32 million in mixed bills. The money was packed neatly in sealed containers, tagged and logged by serial number. John watched as 2 guards in the reserve wheeled the last carton to back, sealed it shut, and locked the doors with twin digital codes. No one else touched the truck. As the convoy rolled toward the city limits, radio chatter filled the air. Convoy 2 approaching East Monroe. Copy that. Traffic clear ahead. Every transmission was steady until the signal cut out near the bridge on Roosevelt Avenue. That was the last time anyone heard from them. At 9:43 a.m., the police escort arrived at the drop point, confused. The truck wasn't there. 10 minutes later, an officer found it abandoned near an old gas station. Both doors closed, no footprints in the dust. It looked as if the men had simply vanished in the middle of their route. Investigators tore the truck apart. The locks were untouched, the money was gone, and the GPS had recorded nothing unusual. No one could figure out how the doors had locked from the inside after the crew disappeared. Then, something stranger happened. One of the FBI agents, while inspecting the truck's black box recorder, heard faint static that slowly formed into a whisper. "We never left." He froze, replayed it, but the words were gone. The sound was just empty radio hiss. Everyone left the scene, that night feeling uneasy. But at exactly 11:59 p.m., the station phone rang. The caller ID read, Federal Reserve Vault. The night sergeant picked it up. There was no one on the line, only the faint rumble of a diesel engine. Then came a man's voice, trembling. "This is John Keller. We're still inside the truck." The call ended, and when they traced it, the line didn't exist anymore. The following morning, Agent Mark Daly arrived at the precinct before sunrise. The night shift looked shaken. Nobody had slept. The recording of the mysterious phone call from John Keller was still playing on a loop through the evidence speakers. His voice sounded weak, distant, like someone speaking from inside a tunnel. "We're still inside the truck," it repeated before cutting to static. But the part that haunted everyone most was the timestamp. The call had come in exactly 20 years to the minute after the heist. September 10th, 2018, 9:43 a.m. That couldn't be an accident. Daly knew he wasn't dealing with a normal crime anymore. The tech team traced the signal origin. It didn't come from any landline, cell tower, or active network. Instead, it pinged from the original heist truck, which had been sitting locked in an FBI storage hangar since 1999. That meant the call came from inside the same vehicle they'd already checked dozens of times. Daly's voice shook as he ordered the team to move the truck to the forensics bay. "Cut it open," he said. "If someone's in there, we're finding out." They use industrial saws and hydraulic cutters. Sparks filled the air as the thick steel was peeled away. Inside the armored truck was nothing, just a faint smell of diesel and dust. But then, as one of the technicians leaned closer to inspect the driver's seat, he froze. The seatbelt was buckled, stretched tight, as if holding someone invisible. The indentation on the leather matched the weight of a seated man, yet no one was there. Daly touched the seat. It was warm. The crew stepped back, disturbed. The truck's camera system was reconnected to power for analysis, but as soon as the feed flickered on, every monitor in the room went black. After a few seconds, an image appeared, a grainy clip of the truck driving down East Harrison Street again. But this time, the reflection in the side mirror showed a completely different skyline, one that no one recognized. It wasn't Chicago. It looked like an empty city with no people, no cars, and a single red light blinking in the fog. Then came a voice through the speakers, faint and distorted. "Don't open the vault. They're not gone." The sound cut out. The screen turned white, and every computer in the lab crashed simultaneously. When the systems rebooted, all the recorded files were wiped clean. Daly felt a cold sweat slide down his back. "We're missing something," he muttered. He ordered a full recheck of every officer who had worked the original case. Out of the 7, 3 had disappeared over the years. No contact, no forwarding address, nothing. When he checked the old records, all 3 had signed off on the truck's final inspection, report the day of the heist. Their signatures were the last official entries before the vault seal logs went missing. The agent flew to Chicago to meet the man who first responded to the scene in 1998, Officer Jim Rutherford, now retired. The old man lived alone near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. When Daly arrived, the door was already open, as if someone had been expecting him. Rutherford was sitting at the kitchen table, holding a dusty photograph of the armored truck. His hands trembled as he said, "I heard the call 2 years ago. Same voice, same words." Daly leaned forward. "You mean Keller?" The old officer nodded slowly. "He called the precinct 2 days after the heist. Said he could see us standing around the truck. But he said we couldn't see him." Daly's phone buzzed. It was his assistant back at HQ. "Sir," she said, panic in her voice. "The truck, it's gone." Daly froze. "What do you mean gone?" "They just checked the hangar cameras," she whispered. "It drove itself out 30 minutes ago." The line went dead. Daly turned toward Rutherford, but the chair across from him was empty. The photo of the armored truck still lay on the table. In the reflection of its glossy surface, Daly saw something that made his heart stop. Himself, standing beside the truck, wearing a driver's uniform. The sound of an engine echoed faintly from the distance outside the window. The echo of that engine grew louder, rumbling to the fog outside Rutherford's cabin. Agent Mark Daly rushed the window, his breath fogging the glass. Down the dirt road, headlights glowed, steady, slow, almost patient. An armored truck was driving toward the house. But that couldn't be possible. The FBI had just told him the truck left the hangar 30 minutes ago, nearly 100 miles away. Yet here it was, its metal sides gleaming faintly in the mist, moving without a driver. Daly's instinct screamed to run, but his training held him frozen. The engine stopped outside. The headlights cut off. Silence. He reached for his gun and stepped outside. The morning air was sharp and still. The truck door clicked open by itself with a metallic groan. "FBI, identify yourself," Daly shouted, aiming his weapon. No one answered. He crept closer, boots crunching over gravel. The inside of the truck was empty, except for the smell of burning wires and something faintly sweet, like gasoline mixed with perfume. On the driver's seat lay a photo. Daly picked it up carefully. It showed the original 1998 crew, Keller, Peterson, and Hale, standing in front of the same truck, smiling proudly. Only now, Keller's face had been scratched out, replaced with black ink in the shape of a wide circle. Beneath it, written in faint pencil, were the words, "Time never moved forward for us." Daly stepped back, shaken. He radioed in, "This is Agent Daly. The vehicle has been recovered outside Lake Geneva. I need backup immediately." But the radio answered with only static, and then a voice, quiet but familiar. "We never left, Agent Daly." He dropped the radio. His pulse raced. That was Keller's voice again, the same one from the phone call. He scanned the empty road, but saw only fog. Then, faintly, he noticed tire tracks leading away from the truck, stretching down the hill toward the lake. 3 sets of footprints followed beside them and stopped at the water's edge. Daly followed slowly, gun raised. The lake was still, the surface perfectly smooth. But as he reached the shoreline, ripples began to form, spreading outward in perfect circles. Beneath the surface, something glimmered, metal, rectangular, just a few feet down. He leaned closer. It was another armored truck, half buried in silt. His reflection stared back at him, warped by the water. For a second, it didn't move the way he did. He stumbled backward, heart pounding. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, a notification from the digital forensics team. The subject line read, "Recovered video file, September 10th, 98. He opened it, and the grainy footage began to play. It showed the original truck driving through downtown Chicago. Inside, Keller looked calm, talking to Peterson and Hale. Then, at a green light, a faint shimmer crossed the windshield, like heat distortion. The men stopped talking, frozen mid-sentence. A loud pop echoed, and everything inside the truck split in two, the same image mirrored, half-transparent. One truck turned right, the other went straight. Both continued as if unaware the other existed. The video glitched. Keller turned toward the camera, his eyes wide with fear. "If you're seeing this," he whispered, "don't let them open the vault again. It's not money inside." The feed cut off. Daly stared at the lake, realizing something terrible. There were 2 trucks, not one. One had returned to the FBI hangar. The other had gone somewhere else, something beyond what anyone could explain. He turned back toward Rutherford's cabin, but it was dark now. The door that had been open was shut tight. From inside came a faint tapping, rhythmic and soft, like someone drumming their fingers against metal. Daly moved closer, whispering, "Rutherford?" The tapping stopped. Then a muffled voice answered from inside the cabin. It was old, tired, and trembling. "Mark, don't open it. It's not me." Daly froze mid-step. His flashlight flickered. From behind the door came the faint sound of a second tapping, perfectly in sync with his heartbeat. And then, from somewhere behind him, the engine of the truck roared back to life. The engine's roar vibrated through the trees, rattling the windows of the cabin. Agent Mark Daly spun around, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The armored truck's headlights flickered on again, cutting through the mist like white knives. It was idling now, driver's door open, exhaust curling into the cold morning air. Daly backed toward the porch steps, torn between 2 impossible choices. The cabin, where Rutherford's voice warned him not to enter, or the truck, where Keller's ghostly voice had already called him by name. "Mark." The voice came again, faint but clearer now, drifting from the open truck. "You need to finish what we started." Daly's mind raced. 20 years ago, $32 million disappeared. Now that same truck had come back on its own, and the people who drove it were still missing. If he walked away now, he'd never learn what happened. But if he got closer, he might never walk away at all. He took a deep breath and stepped off the porch. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes. The air felt heavier with each step, like he was walking underwater. As he reached the truck door, he noticed something strange. The reflection in the driver's side mirror wasn't showing him. It showed Keller, the missing driver, sitting calmly in the seat, hands on the wheel. Daly's breath caught in his throat. Keller turned his head slowly, as if he could see Daly through the glass. His lips moved. Daly couldn't hear the words, so he leaned closer. Then, in a whisper that came from both outside and inside the truck at once, Keller said, "It's still counting." Daly frowned and looked at the dashboard. The truck's digital clock wasn't showing time. It was counting numbers backward. 00:02:16. 00:02:15. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. A countdown. Daly jumped back and shouted, "Everyone clear the area!" But there was no one around to hear him. The cabin lights were out. The woods were silent. He ran toward the cabin, pounding on the door. "Rutherford, we have to go." No answer. The ticking from inside the truck grew louder, sharper. He turned back, and the truck was gone. The gravel where it had been parked was smoking slightly, as if scorched by heat. Daly blinked in disbelief, his heart racing. Then, from behind him, the cabin door slowly creaked open. He raised his gun. "Rutherford." A shadow moved inside, slow and deliberate. A man stepped into the doorway, wearing Keller's uniform, his badge, his gloves. But his face was Daly's. Daly froze, staring at the impossible reflection standing across from him. The figure spoke softly. "We didn't steal anything, Mark. We delivered it." "Delivered what?" Daly whispered. The man smiled faintly. "The vault wasn't meant to hold money. It was meant to hold time." Before Daly could react, the lights inside the cabin flickered violently. The walls began to shimmer, like heat waves bending the air. The entire structure seemed to pulse with static, as if reality itself were struggling to hold together. Daly staggered backward, gripping his head as his ears filled with the same whisper from the recordings, dozens of voices overlapping, all repeating the same phrase. "We never left. We never left. We never left." The air grew icy cold. The light blinked one last time, and everything went dark. When Daly opened his eyes, he was sitting behind the wheel of an armored truck. The dashboard glowed faintly, showing the year, 1998. His uniform was different. His reflection in the mirror wore Keller's name tag. The radio crackled to life. "Convoy 2 approaching East Monroe." A voice said. Daly's breath caught. He looked down at the sealed crates behind him, the same ones containing the missing $32 million. But now he could see the truth. The bills weren't money. They were blank, pure white sheets stamped with strange black symbols, pulsing like heartbeats. He reached for the radio, whispering, "This is Keller." We're still inside the truck. Static filled the cabin. Outside, the fog rolled thicker, hiding the city skyline. The convoy turned the corner. And then, once again, 2 identical trucks rolled out of the Federal Reserve Vault at the same exact time.